I will throw a fucking ticker tape parade for the man who asked for help. The answer to human loneliness is human connection.
There's an epidemic sweeping the world. It's not a virus. It's not a disease. It's loneliness. Men everywhere are drowning in silence, trapped in a void of emptiness. And the worst part? Nobody knows how to fix it.
I could handle depression. I could handle anxiety because there are pills for those, but there was no pill for loneliness. We don't know how to speak the language of loneliness. We don't know how to receive stories of other people's loneliness. So when someone can find the words, we don't know how to sit with it.
Today we sit down with Phil McAuliffe, a former diplomat who had it all but felt nothing. The career, the family, the success, none of it saved him.
I was scared of what would happen if I looked into the abyss, that I would fall in and I would not come back from it. I thought, if I ignore this anymore, this is not going to end well. Loneliness is the unintended consequences of decisions that we take to stay safe and small.
The shocking truth about loneliness no one talks about. Why success doesn't mean happiness, and how you can escape the void before it's too late. This episode will change how you see your life.
We're meant to experience loneliness. It performs a really important evolutionary function. We don't want to ever cure it. We want to understand it because it's trying to tell us something about the connection that we're not getting that's important to us. What generally lies behind depression, what lies behind anxiety, what lies behind suicidal ideation and suicide attempts, and that's loneliness. We are treating the symptoms, not treating the cause.
Have you ever wondered what masculinity even is in the modern era? Are you ready to move beyond the macho bully or the soy boy archetypes? I'm Marc Azoulay, and this is the Men's Therapy Podcast. Together, we'll explore how neuroscience, Jungian psychology, and Buddhist philosophy can transform your life, your marriage, and your business. Are you ready to deep dive into the minds of men? Let's begin. Hello, and welcome back to the Men's Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Marc Azoulay, and I'm here with Phil McAuliffe. He is the founder of Humans Connecting, which is a social organization that is trying to combat this epidemic of loneliness that is sweeping the world right now. He's based out of Australia, and he used to be a diplomat working for the Australian government. So I'm really excited, Phil, to learn more about you, learn your story, and really showcase your company and your movement, because there are so many lonely guys out there. We talk about so much on the show, and I love that you're really just tackling that head on. So welcome to the show.
Yeah. Thank you, Marc. It's lovely to be here and spend some time with you.
Yeah. So I would like to start with the personal story, right? Like, what got you into doing this type of work and really focusing on the loneliness epidemic?
Yeah. I really would like to have kind of a snappy answer to this, but the short part of the story is I didn't want to be doing this. I didn't want to be working on loneliness and human disconnection. If my life plan had gone, according to what I had planned, like I would be in a corner office somewhere in a building here in Canberra, being a senior public servant and, making decisions that support the Australian government of the day and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it didn't turn out that way. And I, somewhere like close to my 40th birthday, I was on a diplomatic posting in Korea. So I was living in Seoul at the time. And my job had me responsible for things in South Korea and in Japan. I was sort of flying between Seoul and Tokyo, and I'm a kid from a tiny country town in regional New South Wales. It's a farming community. There's lots of sheep, wheat, and kangaroos. And I would have these meetings, and I'd be like, "Am I allowed to swear here?" Okay, great. I'd look out the window of these conference rooms and be like, holy shit, that's the Imperial Palace in Tokyo. Or, that's this place or that place. And I'm a kid from a town of 800 people. Like, who made this happen? But I realized, beyond all the meetings and, the fanciness of my job title and all that kind of stuff, and I was married, kids, and there was something within me that I couldn't describe. And because I couldn't describe it, I couldn't ask for help. And I kind of carried on and carried on and carried on and kind of threw myself into work. I threw myself into working out. I threw myself into, all of the things that had kind of gotten me to that point. But there was like the law of diminishing returns. And I would find myself needing to do double the effort to get half the results. And I was just becoming more and more tired and like exhausted, cranky, and not myself, and just starting to become lost within the nothing. And I kind of persisted a bit. I thought, oh, you know what? This is kind of pre-podcast times, but, I'll read the books. I'll read the books and, see what I can get. And, and if I read this book, this will have the answer in it and stuff. So, and alas, there was no answer in it. And so what I found was just one day I was scrolling on, like, reading newspapers while, say eating lunch on and a newspaper that I opened up was the Boston Globe. And in there was a story by a Globe journalist talking about his experience of loneliness as a middle-aged man. And I don't know what made me open it, but I opened it and read it and I thought, shit, this is me. This is me. Save for some context, save from, a few nouns here and there, like his story was mine, like, said and done all the right things in the right way at school and university to get the good job. And then once you get the good job, you do all the things in the job to get promoted and get the opportunities and all that kind of stuff. Do everything right. And he got to his early 40s and realized, like, why does he feel so alone? Why does it feel like the success, in inverted commas, why does it feel so, like, empty? And why isn't he happy? Like, he has everything that's meant to show that he's happy and successful, but why does he feel nothing? And I remember Marc kind of beginning to bargain with myself. And I'm like, no, I don't want loneliness. I don't want that. There is no cure for loneliness. And loneliness was for sad, old people. It was for the elderly. It was for the bereaved. It wasn't for people like me. And I thought, you know what? I could handle depression. I could handle anxiety because there are pills for those, but there was no pill for loneliness. And I kind of doubled down and it didn't shift. I got some help. I did a coaching program. But I remember, like, asking for help from my employer's employee assistance program. And I called, and, I'm a guy. It takes a lot for me to ask for help. And so I kind of did summon up the courage, called the number, and there was a number back in Australia. And it was a woman who sounded like one of my aunties. And she had this very, very broad Australian accent, and which was very kind of grating after not really hearing so many of them. And I said, I kind of sort of think that I might potentially be just a little bit lonely. And she responded by saying, oh, you poor thing. That's not good. And I remember having this response, Marc. I'm like, that's unhelpful. That's unhelpful. And the conversation went on, and, like, it was one of those 10-minute free calls kind of thing. And I'm like, I remember saying to her, I think I may have been a bit rude, actually. But I said to her, it's like, I don't want your pity. I want you to fix it. What do I need to do to fix it? And she's like, you just need to put yourself out there. And I'm like, well, I read that on Google. Thank you. Like, and please, out there is Korea. Like, my employer gave me 4 weeks of Korean language training. Like, how am I meant to go out there and, put myself out there when out there is Korea? I don't fit in. And I've got a big job. I'm a dad. I've got so many responsibilities. Where is this time going to magically come from? And basically she said, oh, well, we're out of time. You'll work it out. And I remember just sort of getting to the point where I'm like, well, that was spectacularly unhelpful advice. I'm really glad that I got it because I got the poor advice because I thought, this is not good enough. This is not good enough. This is not the support that I need. And I got curious. And that curiosity led me to kind of do that coaching program that as I mentioned before. And I got connected to myself. I got connected to the world around me again because I was connected as myself. And that sounds lovely and stuff. That was a lot of tough work and a lot of work within myself, like reckoning with my sexuality and coming out as gay and a whole lot of stuff in there that I'd kind of been carrying around, but and afraid of the world to see and afraid of myself to see and admit. But on top of all of that, I recognized that the thoughts and feelings that I was feeling were showing up in others around me. And I thought, I can do something about this. And the idea was born. And so I started The Lonely Diplomat, wrote a book, blog, started a podcast. And then after I came out, I was living in New Zealand at this time, started like meeting guys over coffee, and within sort of inappropriately short periods of time was hearing like quite upsetting stories of like trauma, like small t trauma, capital T trauma. But at the core of this, and you and I mentioned this offline, like at the core of it was loneliness. And this real need to feel seen and feel heard, and the lengths that people were going to feel seen and feel heard. And I thought I could do something about this. I know a few things about loneliness. And so I started The Loneliness Guy for gay and queer men. And then in 2023, after I quit my job in 2022, started Humans Connecting, which brought everything together for humans, however we identify, whatever we do for a living, and wherever we are in the world, to use loneliness and to get better advice than what I got. And essentially all of this is a way of saying, because I got like spectacularly unhelpful advice, but still so common. I felt compelled to do something about it so others didn't get the poor advice as well and could actually get helpful advice. Might not be comfortable advice, but it's the way through. So yeah, that's how I got to be here. And I was going to say a long story short, but that was not a shortened long story.
But I love that story, man. And there's so many different threads to pull on. I mean, I just want to mention briefly, I think you bouncing off of your EAP program and therapy, really common. We talk about that a lot on this show, that like dudes don't want to feel like the object of pity. We don't want to feel like victims. And I think my industry often makes us feel that way, right? So we don't get the help that we need. And it sounds like you had that exact story. And I love that you then were inspired to build it yourself. I think that's awesome, right? That's like a very cool thing to be like, you know what? It's not out there. Let me pick up the shovel and start digging. But where I actually want to ask you about is, towards the beginning of the story, you talked about that emptiness, right? That feeling that you weren't quite sure what it was, but it was off and it was something, right? And I just love to hear more about that, because I think a lot of guys carry that around. That loneliness, emptiness feeling, that deadness. I've heard guys talk about it, the numbness, not feeling anything. Like we don't really feel sad, but we also don't really feel happy, right? It's just like a very kind of like narrow band of experience that a lot of us are kind of trapped in, and it means that everything is muted. So can you say more about your experience there? Maybe our listeners might relate.
Absolutely. And I'll simply say in our work, we spend a lot of time in this, and we now call it the language of loneliness. And we don't know how to speak the language of loneliness. And this was really frustrating for me because, in a bit of a flex moment, like, I speak English well, and I did French at school, German at university. I've lived in Venezuela, and so speak Spanish. Have learned some Vietnamese from living in Vietnam, and Korean and Japanese, and now Te Reo Māori from like Māori in New Zealand. Me and words, I love words. I love how sentences are constructed. I love, how, we can use words to convey some really deep things and connect with ideas and each other and all of that. Like, I love words. I found it so frustrating, Mark, that I had no words to describe what I was thinking and feeling. And because I had no words to describe, when I sort of would come out as lonely, someone would say, "Oh, why didn't you tell me?" Like, how do I tell you? How do I ask you for support and help when I don't have the words? And I feel like the way that I could possibly best ask for help is to grunt and groan kind of Chewbacca style, and hope that you understand me.
Your primal.
Yeah. And hope that you understand what I'm asking for, because I certainly don't know what I'm meant to be asking for. So the dilemma is for me, I felt almost this abyss, this void within me. And so I completely understand it, when you said, felt dead, felt nothing, felt like in this absolute emptiness. For me, I could best describe it as an abyss, and that abyss just was growing and growing and growing. And I could, for the longest time, kind of avoid that part of myself. But the abyss grew to such a point where I was running out of places to avoid within myself. And I was scared of what would happen if I looked into the abyss, that I would fall in and I would not come back from it. And I thought, if I ignore this anymore, this is not going to end well. This is not going to end well for me. And there was something within me that's like, no, you do not, like, you this is not the path. This is not for you. There are other alternatives. Stop being a stubborn, person. Stop being so stubborn and like do something. And I'm really glad that determined streak kindly within myself said, no, you're worth more of it. And it was kind of what I know now is like my worthiness striking back. And so, but for me now, after years of sort of doing this work and supporting others and trying to put words around it, there's two things that I'll say. We don't know how to talk about loneliness. We don't know how to receive stories of other people's loneliness. So when someone can find the words, we don't know how to sit with it. So we respond with pity and we respond with trying to fix it, both of which can be quite unhelpful. And then I think it was Chopin who said, music is the space between the notes. I think it was, but adapting that, loneliness is in the space between the words. The language of loneliness is in the space between the words. It's what we don't say. It's what we're not saying, or it's the issues that we dance around. So for me, I completely get that point where someone can be really struggling to say something beyond a Chewbacca groaned. Because like, how do we talk about it? And even someone who uses words as well as I do.
Yeah. I think it's really eloquently said, right? It's like, it's the space between the words. It's all that censoring that we do, right? All the stuff that we hold back, all of our feelings and emotions and memories that we don't share. It's all that kind of like, in my, industry, like shadow content, right? Stuff that's like deep in the shadow parts of ourselves. That is us too, right? I mean, it's even things that we might be ashamed of or don't want to express because we don't want to get hurt. So many men, like you're saying, like hold all that back, and then they get pissed that they feel lonely because they're doing just what you did, right? They're checking off the boxes, they're getting the money, they're getting the, wife, they're getting the kids, they're getting the car, they're traveling the world, they're getting all these like things that I think we're told is supposed to make us happy, but because so much is like constricted, we're not actually connected to the world. So I really love how you said that. If you're enjoying the podcast so far, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us to reach more men and inspire them to become the best versions of themselves. Thank you for your support. And now back to the show. What do you think, like, how do I say this? Was there something that you could have heard or learned at a younger age to like kind of counteract that male messaging that like status and money and women would make you happy? Because I think a lot of guys, we don't hear any other messages besides that.
Yeah, such a good question. And I'm just paying attention to what's happening within me as you ask that. And there's a part of me that is so excited that you asked that. I do a fair few podcasts. No one's ever asked that. And the thing that I say to myself, to my former self, have said it, continue to say it, and no doubt will continue to say it, is that it's trite potentially, but I am enough as me. I don't need to hustle for approval. I don't need to hustle for to fit in. I need to belong, not to fit in. And just because I'm in places and spaces where I feel that I need to edit myself, they're not for me. But there are places and spaces for me where I don't need to edit myself. I can be, the rich kind of tapestry of messed up humanity that I am. And be okay with that. But first and foremost, I need to be okay with me not being perfect. I need to be okay with parts of me that I don't like, that I didn't like, that I don't want people and didn't want people to see. And while not everyone has earned that right to see it, I'll go there. But, I need to at least sit with that and accept it. And be okay with all of me, the things that I'm proud to show off and the things that I really would not want splashed on the front of a newspaper or whatever. And I will say this, Mark, loneliness is the unintended consequence of decisions that we take to stay safe and small. We don't want the loneliness, but we find ourselves, when we continue to edit ourselves, to show up, to put masks on, to do whatever it is, rather than anything beyond showing up as who we are in that moment. Loneliness is an unintended consequence of that.
Yeah, it's a protective mechanism, and it makes me think, one of my Buddhist teachers, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, has a quote where he says, true courage is not being afraid of yourself. And that is the path of the spiritual, right? Like that is what we're actually doing out here, is trying not to be afraid of ourselves. And you talked about like finding people that can receive that. Because I think that's not talked about either, right? Like finding spaces or finding people or partners, right? If we get into a relationship that can deal with kind of unfiltered humanity, because there's so much of this like game that I think everyone's playing, this like faking theater acting game that like everything is happy. And I think I'm most familiar, of course, with Western culture, and I know it's huge in our culture, this idea of like, on the happy face and don't say anything bad and like don't ever be in
good vibes only.
Yeah, it's only, right? Yeah, it's like, get out of here, man. But like, I will say, for a lot of my clients, when they go back to their partners and they try to be more vulnerable, sometimes their partners, most time actually, their partners can't actually handle it. And that's like a fucking slap in the face. So yeah, I'm wondering if you see that in your work, and what would you say about that? Yeah.
All the time. So I'll just want to say this. Good vibes only feeds lonely. So I've got no time. I've had no time at all for any of this good. Like if there are people who want to be in my life, who are all eternal happiness and sunshine, and in denial of, other parts of life, well, they don't get privileged access all the way in. Let's just say that. But in doing this work, there's a couple of things, and our work focuses on three pillars of connection. And the first pillar is connection to self. And the second pillar is connection to those most important to you. And then the third pillar is connection to community. Now, each one of those pillars needs to be as strong and as sound as the other two for our connection house to stand. And the issue is when we get advice of like, you've just got to put yourself out there, we focus on you've got to put yourself out there, which is on pillars 2 and 3. But the advice works best when we put the emphasis on another word. And like we do a little bit of editing and we put the emphasis. So you've got to put yourself out there. And so when we put ourselves out there, just as we are in that moment, full of hopes, dreams, and aspirations and all of those, whatever makes us amazing, the connection that we get back from those most important to us and from our communities, the people at work, people in, at the supermarket or on public transport, whatever it is, wherever we are, beyond those most important to us, is the connection that we get, that we need. And part of the issue is, as we go through like our work, where someone has, connected to themselves and this part of the work where someone like, it's beautiful, Mark, and you might see this, but there's this like lightness that someone has. And I could almost sort of pick the moment in a call with someone and they're like, oh, right. Like, I'm allowed to be me and I'm okay. Whatever that looks like, I'm okay because I accept me. And I'm like, there you go. There you go. And then they go out and, have a conversation with their best friend, with their significant other. And then the other person receives that. And one of the things about loneliness, when we come out as lonely, when we bravely and courageously admit our loneliness to ourselves, and I do use those words deliberately, coming out as lonely, because it is akin to coming out of the closet. It takes the same amount of courage to come out as lonely as it does to come out of the closet. The thing about coming out of the closet, though, to someone who is secure in their sexuality, my sexuality means nothing to them. And, if I come out like, Mark, I'm gay, I'm going to say, you'll say, yeah, you, like, how awesome are you? Like, you're being you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? If I was to come out, and this happens all the time, I come like, Phil, what do you do? I work on loneliness and human connection. And people would be saying, oh, that's really interesting, as they finish their drink and go, just excuse me, I'll go and get another drink. And I don't see them talking about it.
Yeah, do know what I'm
No. Or it's something that's like, oh, that's really helpful. You're helping so many other people. And I'm like, you're other people too. It's okay. Like, you have connection needs. It's okay. But the thing is, when we come out as lonely, particularly to those most important to us as a human, and all humans experience loneliness, so we could just get that out of the way. Like, we're made to experience loneliness. It performs a really important evolutionary function. We're meant to. We don't want to ever cure it. We want to understand it. Because it's trying to tell us something about the connection that we're not getting that's important to us. That's it. Part of that is going, at least saying to the, I would really like to connect some more. And sometimes that conversation goes, I would, I've been experiencing loneliness lately, or words to that effect. A declaratory statement saying that, essentially coming out as lonely. In that moment, what we are doing is holding up a mirror to the person receiving that. And they're compelled, whether they're ready or not, to sit with the thoughts and feelings that the quality of the connection that they're getting in life, that they have in life, is not what they want, not what they need. And not everyone is ready for that. And what the irony, and I use these words very carefully, beyond the pity, beyond the fix-it, person who is also uncomfortable with sitting with thoughts and feelings of loneliness, not yours, but theirs, they will take a step back from you. And what I can do in that situation is my loneliness turns me into a powerful storyteller. I can make myself the victim. I can make myself the perpetrator. I could make myself like the judge, the jury, all of the kind of stuff. I'm a whole criminal justice system in my head. And I can make their response about me. But what is happening there is that they're not ready. In most instances, they're not ready to sit with the thoughts and feelings of you coming out as lonely has raised in them about and so they might want to deny, they'll put space between. And so we fear that added space. But not for one moment are we allowed to take a step back. And they're just not ready. As hard as it is, they're not ready to take a step back. All we can do is those who are owning our thoughts and feelings of loneliness and our need as humans for connection to ourselves and those most important to us and communities, be patient, to sit there, to continue to be us. Because we can't compel someone to sit with their own thoughts and feelings of loneliness. We do it when we're ready. And sometimes people are never ready. They're never wanting to be ready.
Right. Yeah. For some people, like that abyss is just too scary, right? I mean, it's like you said, it feels like they're going to be consumed by it. And moving into it is just terror, right? Terror. And admitting a sense of, maybe they feel as weakness or fault or whatever, right? That makes a ton of sense. I'm curious about connection, right? Like the antidote, right? Like you said, when you were speaking that men, or not, well, I guess men, but people in general, right? They have higher needs for connection than they're willing to accept. And the quality of their connection is not what it should be, right? So what in your description, and I have my own that I can chat about afterwards, but what in your kind of opinion is real connection, right? What is this thing that we're going for, and how do you get it? How do you know when you're getting it?
Yeah. Oh, great questions. First of all, for all of this general shittiness of the thoughts and feelings of loneliness, as you said, we do know the antidote. We know the antidote. We know what works, and we've known it ever since we started to be humans. And the antidote is not on social media. The antidote is not like AI. The antidote, it's not like the latest gadget or whatever, which, I've got lots of thoughts on in terms of like the response to loneliness is not generally through AI. We already know the response to loneliness, and the answer to human loneliness is human connection. And that then turns the question into a kind of, thinking in terms of like maths, like mathematics. And how, like, we know so how do we feel connected? We can't help but feel connected when we feel that we belong. And so that then becomes an answer to it, like, how do I feel that I belong? And again, how do I feel that I belong within myself? How do I feel that I belong with those most important to me? How do I feel that I belong in community? So then, how do we feel that we belong? We feel that we belong when we feel seen and we feel heard. Simple, but each one of those words there, like, in order for you, Marc, to be seen, you need to show up. In order for you to feel heard, you need to speak from here. And so this all gets wrapped up in, being vulnerable and authentic and, sometimes some, Instagram philosophy words. But it really is like a conscious decision. And in our work, I say this all the time, we need to choose connection. And by choosing connection at any opportunity, at any and every opportunity, we're feeding connection. We're feeding how we belong. And it is as simple as before walking into a room, when we're journaling, when we're reflecting, whatever it is, like going, okay, I need to be me right now. And that to me is, there's a whole, like, let's talk about play by play, how to do it and stuff. But if we're wanting a framework, that's the framework. If you want to feel that you want to feel connected, feed belonging. And then as well, sort of adapting from Francis Weller here and potentially maladapting it, but saying something like, we are always on the lookout for places to belong. And we also then need to be places where others feel that they belong with us. So if we're always looking to be seen, if we're always looking to be heard, we also then need to see others. We also then need to hear others so they feel that they belong with us. We, like the two-way radio, the walkie-talkie analogy here, if we're constantly walking around with our finger on the button, transmitting, we're not receiving. And we need to transmit and receive to feel connected.
I love that. And what I like about it is that it has personal accountability, because then you're talking about like, TikTok therapy and things like that, which I bash all the time, right? But like this idea that I think there's like this entitlement that's also out there of like, every space needs to accept me, right? It's still victim-y, right? Like I want to go in and I want to feel comfortable everywhere. There's like a sense of entitlement there. But I like your definition because you're saying like, you need to put yourself out there, right? But in a real way, right? You need to actually like show up, take emotional risks, have conversations with people that maybe you wouldn't typically, share a part of yourself that you try to keep behind closed doors, right? Like, I don't think belonging is like entitled. I don't think people are entitled to that. I think it does take work. And I think there's a lot of people that are pissed off about that. I don't know, or resistant to that work, So I guess my question for you, right, is like, how do you get people and maybe men in general to like start to do some of that work of actually seeking connection and being honest of what they need rather than just kind of expecting it and then getting pissed off when it doesn't come?
Yeah. My smart ass answer to that very fantastic question is, how do you do it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, because I'm still trying to find the answer.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's really it's emotional risks, right? It's like it's saying things that like my brain is like, I don't know, maybe, right? I'm not trying to be rude or whatever, right? But just like getting out there and taking like pushing that edge around connection, I find is like really, really critical. I think like for me, and I think for a lot of men, like shared hobbies and shared activities is big. So trying to find my hobbies and doing them socially with other dudes, right? It's critical, right? Like I could do all my stuff alone, but doing it with other people is critical. I also live in a small town. Sounds like you grew up in a small town, and we have a app called Nextdoor where essentially people can post all kinds of shit, right? And some people ask for help on that, right? And like I offer help, right? That's like my kind of volunteer work in my small town is, I'll offer handyman help, or I'll, do meal trains for people that, have been injured or sick, or, I'll help move, I don't know, like a bookcase for an old person, right? Like whatever, right? Like I just try as a practice to like put myself out there in that way and contribute to my community, right? But those are some ideas of like kind of concrete ways to take risks. And I do think, I'm curious your thoughts on this, I think that community is inconvenient. It's the idea of inconveniencing yourself to be there for the greater whole. And what I see in a lot of Western culture is that nobody wants to inconvenience themselves, right? So people feel really alone, disconnected because they don't want to make the sacrifice required to improve a community. It's all about compromise. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you wanted to open up, but you were afraid that it wouldn't be taken well? You ask yourself, what's the point? Nothing's going to change anyway. So you do what you always do. You push it down, numb out the pain with a drink, a night out, or pornography. I've been there myself, and I know that men lack the outlets for emotional expression, which is why I founded Men's Therapy Online, a healing hub for men's mental health. If you've been knocked on your ass or just crave meaningful connection, join Men's Therapy Online, a community of men who just get it. We offer individual therapy, men's groups, and powerful retreats all led by licensed therapists. At Men's Therapy Online, we will help you to get back on your feet and take your life to the next level. Start your journey today at menstherapy.online. Well, I'm curious, what you think about that idea that community requires inconvenience on some level.
Yeah, mutual inconvenience. And what's the expression? Hell is other people. And I think it was Sartre who said that in French, l'enfer et les autres, or something like that. I don't know. My French is terrible now, but yeah, I love that. And rather than sort of going down an existentialism rabbit warren, I'll retreat from that. But one of the things, Marc, that you just said there was, in like your contribution to community and how when people ask for help, that like, put it on Nextdoor or put it on Facebook or whatever. And, in a stunning example of how social media can actually feed connection when we use it to connect. The issue, particularly with men, and I do a lot of work with men, with another coach, Mike Campbell. And the issue with men is certainly here in Australia, the definition of being a good man, what we call like a good bloke, is made of like bloke/dude. But in showing up as a good bloke is always the person who like volunteers to do something. Like, there might be a member of like the volunteer fire brigade, like the fire service. They might be, but they're out and about in the community. They're the first person who puts their hand up when, like the local football club or like a sporting club needs new uniforms and they're, trying to like raise money or whatever. They're the first. We all know the type and we all might identify with being that type proudly. I say this to guys all the time. It is one thing to give the help. We are taught that to be a good bloke, you need to like offer help. I will throw a fucking ticker tape parade for the man who asked for help. Because that is a stunning example of courage. That is a stunning example of vulnerability. And that takes practice, because the emotional hurdles that we need to leap over to like say to someone, I like, whether or not like I can't move this bookcase. It's too big for me. So, if you've got a few moments, can you come in and we'll move it? Versus all the way through to, I am feeling quite scared within myself right now. I don't know how this is going to go. I don't know what I need you to do right now, but I just need you to be here and sit with me a moment as I do a Chewbacca groan. And that is one thing to show up. Yay. Beautiful. What a contribution you're making. But it goes to that Francis Weller point of like being a place, like we can't just only give help, we need to take help. And I'll say this, and I want to sort of give a content warning. I'm going to be talking about suicide now. I'm tired of going to funerals. I'm tired of having the, for men in Australia, suicide between 18 and I want to say 44, may even be 54. The stats, the data escapes me right now, but suicide is the number one killer of men in Australia. And how many times have we at least heard it said around us, whether at the funeral or beyond it? I wish that he had asked for help. And I don't know this for certain, but I also wonder how many of those men decided to take their own life rather than ask for help for loneliness. So this isn't like just a statement of the bleeding obvious. But this isn't like small stuff. This is absolutely the stuff of life. And if we are to feel connected to community, we need to allow community to connect with us. Because we love to help other people. But we're denying, I still do this all the time. I really struggle to ask for help. Because I've got some kind of perverse notion that I'm the helper. I don't get helped. I don't need help.
Yeah, and I think it's a trap of masculinity, right? Of like, I think until we figure that out, right? It's the idea of like being helped means I have to be submissive to whoever's helping me, right? It's like I should be able to do it myself, but because I need help, this person is like superior to me in whatever way. There's like, I think a big level of insecurity that, like I fall into that trap too, right? Of like, I want to be the guy that's like the superhero, Captain America, super soldier that can do everything. And it's like, no, right? And like all great things are done in teams and are done in community, right? Like any one person can't do anything. I also like your point about suicide. I had one of my original supervisors, he used to say that suicide is a terminal case of loneliness, right? Like that is what it is, right? It's this like extreme disconnection that leads to death ultimately. So I really appreciate that you brought that in and brought attention to that. Especially in Australia, it sounds like that is it's true here in the States too, but yeah, men are killing themselves at a rate that is, should not be ignored. And it seems like it is a lot,
Yeah. And here in Australia, like, there's charities, there's awareness around suicide. And I find this deeply fascinating. There's also like there's suicide awareness, suicide prevention. There's things like it's not weak to speak. There's like Lifeline, Men's Line, all of these fantastic things. And then there's like Are You OK Day, which brings mental health into workplaces, and you have cupcakes and a morning tea, like a break, trying to put it into an American context, but like a morning tea, and everyone's sort of like, let's talk about mental health. Mental health is really important in our workplace. If you need help, call EAP. Have a good cupcake and coffee, everyone. Let's do this next year. And great. Like it can start conversations and all that kind of stuff. And we have this around anxiety. We have this about depression. Can we please start having the conversation about what generally lies behind depression, what lies behind anxiety, what lies behind suicidal ideation and suicide attempts? And that's loneliness. We are treating the symptoms, not treating the cause.
For sure. Yeah. And awareness only goes that far, right?
Exactly. And to like go back to the start of the chat there, sorry to Mark, but you said like, tackling this head on, like calling a spade a bloody shovel. And like, I have had a career dancing around topics that are sensitive by not saying them. It doesn't work. When we like, that works in diplomacy, but it's not a mode of operation that works within ourselves. Right? Like we are going there. We're having kind and honest, loving conversations about the thing that matters and helping people understand the thing that matters. So then they're forearmed to respond to it in the way that they need for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And I think creating places and spaces where they can connect, right? Like when you talk about that, that work meeting, it's like, oh yeah, we're talking about it versus like, just cut the crap, man. And just like give people a chance to talk to each other and actually work on loneliness instead of being like, hey, talk to somebody else about this, call your EAP or do whatever, there's another question I want to ask you, which is like a little bit of a curveball. So let me know. I might be assuming a little bit about your experience or not. But I mean, truly, the topic I don't get to talk about enough on this show. I maybe can talk about it with you, which is you talk about your experience being a gay man, right? And like coming out and doing work for, gay and queer men and combating loneliness. And a subset of the population I work with are gay men, I'm assuming similar to you, that are masculine presenting, right? That sometimes feel like they don't belong in like modern gay culture, right? So they feel both like they don't belong in the heterosexual world and they also don't belong in the gay world. And they're just like, what the fuck, right? Because they're not, doing kind of like, again, the stereotypical gay community stuff, right? They're more masculine. They're just the sexuality, right? It's gay. So yeah, I guess I'm curious. It sounds like that was part of your experience. And I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about that, because I don't think it's talked about enough, right? And I don't think like more masculine gay men talk about their experience of coming out and maybe not fitting in, being kind of between two worlds, Yeah.
That last statement there is really my, like, I don't feel like not, and it absolutely fed my loneliness. I was the smart kid. I was the like non-sporty kid in the sense that I didn't enjoy the sports that were popular, like, and so I turned that into like, I'm bad at sport. It's like, no, I just don't enjoy that sport. I like swimming, I like running, I like playing cricket, I like, doing all of these other things that just, weren't like really valued where I was. And then, like at university, like I was the smartest kid at school, and then I went to a great university here in Australia, Melbourne Uni, and I didn't feel smart enough in those classes. I was surrounded by really smart kids, and then, went to work and, surrounded by amazing people who also did well at university and didn't feel like I was enough there, and I needed to amp myself up. I would be too much, and then I'd need to edit myself so I would just be enough. I'd walk that that impossible tightrope of trying to be enough. Prioritizing other people's comfort over my own authenticity. All right. And so to answer your question, and I'm really glad that you threw that curveball at me, because the last that I checked, there is no office within the United Nations that defines what it means to be a member of the LGBTQA plus community. What that's meant to look like, what that's meant to sound like, how that's meant to present, how that's meant to dress, how that's meant to do anything like that. And so many of us, and I came into this, like I came out when I was 4, I forget how old I am now. But like 40, when I was 42. And, you know, my, like I have teenage sons, like they're twins. And so I started to, you know, and a term of endearment in the gay community is daddy. And apparently I give like daddy vibes because of like, you know, I'm fit, beard, grey hair, and like, you know, I listen to people, whatever. I'm like, so no, you don't. Yeah, you do not call me daddy because I am actually a dad. And like, no, like that's a privileged title that you don't get to use. But what I'm saying here is I find it perverse that we are struggling to fit into something and measure ourselves against something that fundamentally does not exist. And substitute that, and I'll, you know, work with a whole lot of already very straight men, like very straight men. And, you know, I was in the closet for over 30 years. And when we hold ourselves, whether it's, you know, to a gay queer ideal or a masculine ideal, we've lost us because we're constantly measuring. Because I'm sure if there was something like an office at the United Nations in New York or Geneva or wherever, that, you know, the office for, you know, defining everything about, you know, the LGBTQA plus community, there's also, you know, I'm sure on that floor that doesn't exist, there's also an office for defining what it means to be a woman, and also an office for that defines masculinity and how to measure ourselves as a man. It doesn't exist. And the thing about the work that we do, and very deliberately we say this, however you identify as a human, whatever you do for a living, wherever you are in the world, like, you need to be you. And there is a freedom in accepting and being you, rather than trying to contort yourself into some kind of definition of what it means to be X, whatever X is, because that definition is constantly changing. You might like land it like Simone Biles on a, like, you know, on a floor routine, and you stick the landing, but then the definition moves as soon as you work it out. Pardon me, fuck that shit. Got no time for that anymore. I'm all about however you identify. And you know, yeah, I'm gay, but I also have 17-and-a-half-year-old twins. My ex-wife, like, so their mum and my partner now, like, we're this family of 5. We live in different houses. But life is amazing because I'm showing up as me. I go to a gay running club every or most Saturday mornings. And, you know, I like being in gay spaces with gay people, but still, when I go into those places and spaces, I don't feel gay enough because I haven't been out ever since I was a teenager. And I go to places of, like, you know, families, and we're like oh, you're like, oh, isn't it nice? You're the same sex couple. Oh, you're just like a real family. Fuck off. Yes, we are a real family. Yeah, it's like,
yeah, fuck that.
Yeah. But critically, Mark, I belong to me now.
Okay.
So wherever, like, to quote Maya Angelou, but wherever I go, there I am. And I belong because I belong to me.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And I'm going to send some of my gay clients over to you and your organization, because I think they need mentors like you, truly. Right? Because, I mean, I'm a straight dude, so I don't really understand it in a way that certainly you do, because you live the experience. But, like, yeah, they talk about like just what you said, not being gay, not feeling gay enough to be in these gay spaces, but not feeling straight enough to be in the straight spaces. And I think that's like a very specific flavor of loneliness that isn't talked about enough. So I appreciate you kind of sharing your version of that. Well, Phil, I've really enjoyed having you on the show. Can you share with our listeners like a little bit about your organization, about where to find you online if they want to learn more about you and what you do?
Yeah, so this has just been an absolute joy and a privilege to spend some time with you, Mark, and you listener. So we're at humansconnecting.org, so org, if org gets lost in the Australian accent. So we have learning about two things: destigmatizing loneliness, and we destigmatize loneliness by talking about it openly, recognizing that it is, as I said before, performs that basic evolutionary function that tells us that we're missing some kind of connection that we need, and dropping the judgment that comes beyond that, about, worthiness for love and belonging and things like that. And helping you understand your loneliness. So when you experience it as you're meant to, in the future, you go, oh, this is how I can respond. And so that's the second part of our mission, is to help you get the connection that you need and deserve. That comes from understanding your loneliness and listening, knowing how to listen to it without judgment, indeed welcoming it. And like going, you feel terrible. These are yucky thoughts and feelings. I need to slow down. I recognize this as loneliness. I need to slow down. Just like when hunger tells me that I need to slow down and eat, I need to slow down and connect. But what connection do I need? And so we've got services that help people sit with their loneliness and then identify the connection that is important to them, and then come up with a plan called the connection plan that people can work through and go, okay, to stay connected to myself, to those most important to me and my community, I need to do this every day. I need to do this every week. I need to do this every month, or like every fortnight, every month, every quarter, every half year, and annually. And that's the plan. It's like demystifying this, taking hope out of the equation and putting us back in the driver's seat, so we can actually go, right, this is part of life. I need to actually respond to it in a helpful way. That's what we do. And we've got a blog, we've got a podcast, we've got all these ways that sort of help people do those two things, to destigmatize loneliness and to get them the connection that they need and deserve. So all through humansconnecting.org.
Awesome. And listeners, all that stuff will be in the show notes. You can click the link, check out Phil and his organization. I really like that you blend to be talking on the show that like effective therapy, which I think a lot of therapy is not effective, especially for men, but it blends insight and action. And I like that those are kind of the two pillars of what you do, right? You're bringing insight to something, but then you're also presenting like real tangible action that people can take to really make a meaningful change in their life. So Phil, thank you so much for joining us again on the show. And listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you've enjoyed this, please do all the social stuff. You know what it is by now. Like, share, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Send this podcast to somebody, one person who you feel like might be struggling with loneliness. It's a way to hear them and see them, just like Phil's been talking about. Get them some help and some resources. And if you're feeling it, which, like he said, pretty much all of us are, right? Dig into his stuff, dig into the work, reach out to a therapist, right? Do the work to get that connection that you need. It is out there, but it does take a lot of courage and a lot of bravery. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week on another episode of the Men's Therapy Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. And don't forget to visit menstherapy.online to learn more about the work that we are doing to support and inspire men. Until next time, keep moving forward.